All right, cool. So welcome everyone for the second all-core dev for Celo. So for this call, we had one, item on the agenda that we had to move to the beginning of the list, uh, based on the events that happened yesterday on Ethereum and stuff. And that is the Churrito meta spec. I'm not even sure if I'm saying it right. But it's like a proposed hard fork to correct specification. I believe, Victor, if you click on Churrito meta spec, yeah, awesome. Yeah, so it's basically, if you scroll down to specification, yeah, so it's in this hard fork proposal, what we're proposing is correctly specifying EIP 211. And I believe, James, if you're on the call, hoping you can elaborate more on Shuito.
Yeah. So the high-level overview is that around the time that Celo blockchain's code base forked off from Geth, they introduced sorry. We follow upstream, but we have several months of lag doing so. So our current version of Celo blockchain has a bug that was introduced in Geth version 1.9.6. This bug caused the consensus failure on Ethereum yesterday, and we'd like to fix it. It's a misimplementation of the EIP 211 spec, and it affects how return data is handled by a contract in very specific situations. We do not anticipate that this bug will have impact on contract security or cause loss of funds to users. We don't believe we're at risk of a consensus failure. But the main risk is that if we start rolling out a fix, we become at risk of a consensus failure. The failure happens when two different nodes handle the same transaction different ways. So if we have two different node versions on the network, one of which has the fix and one of which doesn't, that will cause a consensus failure. So in order to fix this and to do it in the most risk-free way possible, we are going to try to schedule the Churrito hard fork.
Yeah, and the idea is, with this specification for the Churrito hard fork, is that it's like a small change that would correctly implement the EIP 211 specification. And we would rather get to it sooner rather than later. And this doesn't have any impact on the donut hard fork that we're planning from 6 months from now. But because it's a small chain that would require a hard fork, we're hoping to target a date like at most 1 month from now, which is why we wanted to bring it up to everyone's attention. So what I'm hoping to get with this call, at least for this item, is that we would reach rough consensus on, yes, this is a special case given what happened yesterday in Ethereum, that would warrant writing a specification for Churrito and trying to get it activated on mainnet within a month. If we look at, like, at least from a coordination perspective, because we have a good relationship with all the validators, and in terms of communication, we can reach out and coordinate very easily. And given that Celo is not super widespread on a lot of different exchanges, coordinating with them wouldn't be extremely complicated, just because it's like a small number of folks. And with any custodian or node operators or any app that is running a full node, it wouldn't be as complicated, just given it's for 1 month target, just because of how small the change is. But it would definitely require a hard fork just so we can resolve this implementation of the EIP 211 specification. So this is the draft for it. I'm hoping with this call, we can at least agree on the specification and maybe after this call, if there's any rough consensus on it, we can specify a block number for Baklava, for Alpha Horus, and for Celo mainnet. And we start with Baklava. I want to target a block number 2 weeks from now for Alpha Horus 3 and for Celo mainnet and 4 and stuff. But that's what we're coming to the community with as a proposal, because the hard work cannot be done only by, it needs everyone's coordination together. So with that, I want to leave it up for everyone to start asking questions and stuff, because this is the most, in my opinion, the most important item on the list right now.
Let's go there.
Cool. I can go first. I'm curious what the kind of rationale for, so I guess given that there's not a really any risk here until basically the bug is like this misimplementation is fixed, I'm curious what the rationale is for trying to roll this out quickly as opposed to batching it in with the donut hard fork.
The main risk that we undergo here is that we canonicalize this behavior, and then we have to keep the hard fork implemented in the code base forever. If we can respond fairly quickly and nobody triggers this behavior in the next 4 weeks, we can have a hard fork, we can activate it, and then we can remove that hard fork's activation from the code base. We can essentially retroactively fix the consensus rules. But other than that, I don't see like a extremely compelling reason to fix this, other than that it is a bug, it is clearly incorrect behavior, and it would be a real shame to just like make that canon forever.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess if it's
I am moving tomorrow.
if it's already been triggered, does that change things?
Let me pay attention. This is rather serious.
Not very much. I still would rather like get this in sooner rather than later. But at that point, it becomes a bit more of like perception, I suppose. Is we would rather people see this as fixed and as a non-issue that has been taken care of than as an outstanding thing.
Cool, that makes sense. Thank you.
I have a question. Sorry. Why? So I apologize if I don't understand the nuance, but why do you say it's like becomes canonical or like forever? I guess I just don't understand that part.
So we want the full node to be able to validate, all these blocks at any point in the future, which means that any behavior that is in these blocks and that happens on chain, that code to validate that has to be present forever. So if this behavior is triggered and it enters the history of the blockchain, we have to keep around the bugged code, and we have to selectively, run the bugged code for these blocks and the good code for other blocks.
I see. That sounds kind of annoying.
It's annoying. Geth does this for every past hard fork. Like it's a regular thing. It's just like messy and unpleasant. It would be really annoying.
Got it. So is there? I guess then, like, if that's the case, why are we waiting a month to hard fork? Like, can't anybody just trigger it?
Yeah, that was going to be my question. Can I just go craft a transaction right now that triggers this, and then we won't have this debate?
Yes, you can go craft a transaction right now. I have a mild preference that you don't do that.
Fair enough.
This isn't gonna like cause a desync for Celo. This isn't going to cause anyone's smart contracts to spray money everywhere. Right now, we're trying to figure out what's the least amount of operational overhead and future annoyance for both the developers working on this and the validators who have to upgrade right now. Given that there is a Golang security patch dropping and everyone will have to update their nodes in the next couple of weeks anyway, we kind of figured it would be a good time to bundle those things into one upgrade.
Well,
That makes sense.
one thing to
I will.
say,
ahead.
Sorry.
so because the Go vulnerability hasn't been disclosed yet and we don't know the exact details, we don't want to necessarily say that it'd be fine to wait 2 weeks for that. The Go Ethereum developers made it sound like it's pretty serious. So at least as far as a Go update, probably be better to upgrade sooner rather than later.
Yeah. If possible, we're looking to bundle these into a single node update, but the Go is much more severe. The Golang security upgrade, we think, is much more severe than the hard fork behavior upgrade.
So kind of in line with bundling the updates, how does this overlap with 1.2? Because right now I know 1.2 was upgraded on Alpha Horus, but there's been some issues on Baklava right now. So if that gets delayed, there may be a collision in terms of the timeline of the releases.
I can answer that. So the updates will be done for both 1.1 and 1.2. So if you're running 1.2 on Baklava, you'll have a new version of that with the fork code. If you're running 1.1 on mainnet, you'll have a new version of that as well.
Got it. Thank you.
I will just point out that I'm experiencing Celo software upgrade fatigue. I feel like a non-trivial amount of my last 2 weeks have been spent managing software upgrades for Celo, and it seems like I'm about to spend another 2 weeks on that. So it would be kind of cool if we could start consolidating some of these things. And I know as well, I guess I'm probably a little bit grouchy because I hit a bug during validator rotation during a software upgrade that caused me downtime. But just in general, I'm more cautious about Celo upgrades now, and there appear to be at least 3 on the horizon now, which isn't it feels like we could kind of start to coalesce these into a single update if there's no overriding timeline that has to be adhered to. I'm not sure how other validators feel. If other people are just fine and I'm whiny, that's okay too.
I think we've, definitely feedback well taken. This is somewhat of an irregular situation where Ethereum had a major consensus issue, and we were caught flat-footed because they did not disclose the bug to us when they patched it, or to anyone really. So I wouldn't expect this update cadence to be a regular thing. Yeah, we're pretty unhappy about it as well.
Totally, but why don't we just drop any 1.2 release on mainnet, bundle everything together into call it 1.3 and release that in a month?
Mm-hmm.
Do we need 1.1 and 1.2? I know that there are fixes in those, but none of them seem as critical as these fixes. Do we need to roll out all of these upgrades sequentially?
So I'll give a context for that. We can't wait for 1.3 within a month to activate the hard fork because there's a coordination angle that is why we want to do it in a month rather than in a week. I'm hoping that we can target at least, if we come to rough consensus on the block number, within a week or two, we would have a release at least for that specific chain for Churrito. Because the bigger part of the job is making sure every validator, every exchange, every node operator, every wallet, and every custodian are on that specific version number before a hard fork happens. And that for me is going to take at minimum 2 weeks before the hard fork activation within a month. So this is something that we're proposing that we probably going to have to move fast on. And I agree that, you know, it's kind of like an unfortunate situation. Before yesterday, we didn't even, like, Shuita was just a twinkle in my eyes, as the saying goes. But like now it's like a kind of like a serious situation, which is why we're bringing it up.
And also for upgrades, so the current kind of version of mainnet is 1.1.0. So we'll be applying this patch fix to there. So if you're on 1.1 and don't want a large upgrade, you can do that. And then we'll also be bringing this fix into on top of 1.2. So it'll be 1.2.2. And so if you kind of want to go that route and get all of these upgrades done at the same time, you can do that as well. And I think that's basically all of our planned releases until next year once we start looking into the hard fork upgrade with Donut.
Can I ask, is it 1.2 already scheduled for mainnet? Meaning, can we go with the 1.2.2 version at the time that this will be deployed, and be safe to go with the 1.2? Like, will there be time to test this on Baklava prior to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So right now, 1.2 has been on Baklava for I guess like a week and a half to 2 weeks. And then, so following a typical schedule, once we feel comfortable with it, we can start rolling it out on mainnet next week. And that's kind of when our recommendation would be. So kind of a week to 2 weeks for 1.2 out onto mainnet versus 4 weeks versus the hard fork timing. So it is possible to get, if you want to get 1.2.2 onto mainnet before the hard fork.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it doesn't totally make sense to me why you'd want to cut a 1.1, but if you do, more power to you. I mean, it sounds like what you're basically saying is wait for 1.2.2 and then push that onto mainnet in a month. It's like basically what I'm hearing. There's no overriding desire to update to 1.2 on mainnet, and you'll have a update I have to uptake in a month anyway. So I should just wait a month and uptake 1.2.2. Is that incorrect?
That's basically correct if you want to do that. I know some validators are a little more cautious with upgrades, which is why we have the 1.1.1. So
Sure.
if you want the smaller update, you can do that. So that's kind of like, it's a straightforward enough thing to release both of those. So it's kind of your choice whether you want to be on 1.1.1 or 1.2.2 for when the hard fork happens.
Got it.
Okay,
And then
seems reasonable.
it would be only one key rotation because, right, for most of the people, if we're going straight to 1.2.2.
Yes.
Yeah. And another, again, benefit that we're hoping from getting 1.2 is that after that, you could do upgrades with the hot swap. So you won't need a key rotation after you are on 1.2.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks.
So to kind of summarize, it sounds like it's possible to just jump straight to 1.2.2 and get both the 1.2 and the Chorito patch, right?
Yes.
Great.
All right. So I want to start getting rough consensus on this because with rough consensus, we can agree on a rough timeline for the block number activation for Baklava, Alpha Horus, and Celo mainnet. And we can move this to last call we can merge the draft, and then we can, send a PR to move it from draft status to last call once we have rough consensus with everyone. For last call, I would suggest a small reading and review period of a few days rather than a week, because of the urgency around this hard fork. And after last call, what happens is the static, we move it to accepted. And then as soon as every activation happens on either Baklava, Alpha Horus, and testnet, then after that, what happens, we move it from accepted to final and stuff within a month. For now, though, I'm hoping that, we can at least, talk about the specific implementation. Does anyone have any thoughts on it? On getting rough consensus around doing, my proposal is, and I'm open to other people's points, do Baklava within 2 weeks, activation on Baklava within 2 weeks, Alpha Horus within 3, and then mainnet within 4 from now.
I mean, sounds reasonable to me, but
Okay. Normally, yeah, silence could mean rough consensus. Everyone has agreed on it. So if everyone agrees on this, if actually a better question would be, if anyone doesn't agree with it, please speak up. Okay. So great. We have rough consensus on moving Churrito to last call. I'll be working with James after this call just to assign the block numbers for Baklava, Alpha Horus, and Celo mainnet. Luckily, because Celo is 5-second block time, it's very easy to predict at what day the block number would be activated for Baklava, Alpha Horus, and Celo mainnet. I would propose, today is Thursday, I would propose Monday as the last day for last call for this small specification. And if everyone is good with that, we can move on to the next item on the list. Great.
Can I just ask one question regarding the upgrades? I don't know what's now the consensus, but will it be possible to track the timelines and the progress somewhere? Because it's a little bit hard now to follow up if there are changes or anything, because there is always an article, but it's kind of get outdated, and then there is discussion on Discord. And so will we have one place where we can always go and follow up with the timelines, with the updates?
Yeah, that's a good point. So are you part of the Celo Signal mailing list? Are you on?
Yes.
Are you?
Yes.
So I normally, I always send emails about important events and updates happening through there, and I communicate it on Discord. Before the mainnet timeline, we're probably gonna have a call, an event to watch the hard fork together. That's something that we can potentially do to track it down, and we'll be monitoring the Baklava and Alpha Horus activation. We might even set up a fork monitor before then. And all that information will be on Discord, a forum post. And if you keep up with Celo Signal mailing list, I'll be updating that throughout. If that's not enough, is there any other way that you prefer to be notified?
Yeah, this seems okay. It's just a lot of streams for me like this. So I don't know if I don't really work with Discord that much, if it makes sense to do some custom channels which are archived if there is some I don't know, bigger milestone or something. So it's not lost in all the channels like the by date ones or the network specific.
Gotcha. So, but like, I understand the Discord argument. Like, does email seem to be working so far, just to keep following up with like the milestones and stuff like that?
Yeah. I'm following everything, but it's a bit tedious when, like, in 1 or 2 weeks, you basically need to follow up where the thing changed. If somebody talked on Discord about the topic, or somebody posted something on the forum, or there will be some updates through the mailing list.
Yeah, so for this, because it's like a month activation thing, it's gonna like, I'm gonna be following up with every validator. So even if I'm not sure you received an email or seen it, I'm gonna be following up with you and all the other validators to ensure you're on the correct version prior to that. So that would be something that, just as an extra layer, which I need to do anyways, not only for validators, for node operators and exchanges anyway, but like, that's something else to be expecting, like me reaching out personally.
Okay.
All right, cool. Any other questions?
And yes, in the future, can we treat Celo signal as like a single source of truth for what plans are?
That's a good question. So Celo signal is more like an alert kind of bulletin board, like a mailing list with alerts for, okay, here's what's happening. Like there's the release notes for Celo blockchain or Celo CLI or the attestation service. But I don't really write a lot of content within Celo signal, but I rather hyperlink it to like a forum post or the GitHub release notes or something like that. Which are the source of truth. And Celo signal is more like a way to alert people directly so they don't have to hang out on Discord all the time.
For things like an upgrade schedule, it might be nice to have like a source of truth that tracks the progress of upgrades and rollouts like this, especially as we're going into like unplanned things like Chorito and major hard forks like Donut.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe it would make sense to create a separate category or like a group on the forum for this, and that way everybody can set also alerts when there's a new post or like follow that up there. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm okay with the Discord channel for that, but like, the feedback I was receiving that, the less the better. But like, I'm also happy with like having a Discord channel for that. And like, James was saying, having like a single source of truth just for the hard fork information specifically. So yeah, it's something that we can definitely do before this hard fork. Okay. Others were talking about just using the forum post as a source of truth for now, and stuff. And I think that's also a valid proposal.
I would just like to also mention that I've been following up on Celo Signal, and I think the current format is really good. So it's short. I can review it quickly, and then if I need more information, I just go ahead and follow the links. So I would definitely keep it like it is. So the Celo Signal works great for us.
Sounds good. Outside of communication, I think communication should be like sufficiently answered by now. We have several avenues and I'll be coordinating with everyone. Are there any other concerns or stuff before we move on to talk about Donut? All right. Alrighty. So we're gonna talk about Donut. So for Donut, like I don't like. There's a lot of things. Victor, if you go to the file change and like that tab, yeah. Yeah, it's just the Donut hard fork. So it's also added to the agenda. I don't expect us to reach. This is still early draft form, and there's like a lot of items on the specification section. That if you scroll down, Victor, to the spec part. Thank you. Yeah, there's a bunch of proposal, and because this is only a draft form, things can be added or removed moving forward and stuff like that. But this is the initial specification for the donut hard fork. Notably, it's adopting several things that are pre-Berlin specification for the YOLO v3 testnet. The modified ModXP gas costs. There's the other proposal, EIP 2315, simple subroutine for the EVM. There's also gas cost increases as part of the proposal, and optional access list and type transaction envelope. I believe, and James, correct me if I'm wrong, EIP 665 and 2537 and 2539 are not part of the pre-Berlin spec, right?
That's correct. The first 5 on that list are part of the Berlin spec, essentially. So we're adopting those because Ethereum is adopting those. The next 4, the ED 2559 and the 3 BLS EIPs are cryptographic primitives. So we would like to support a lot more cryptographic protocols, and they're relatively straightforward and well standardized functions. Those are being implemented mostly by outside technical work. And the last 3 on that list, the CIPs, are Celo specific. They're not adopted from the EIP process. They're in-house new changes.
Yeah. So yeah, the rationale is making sure that we maintain upstream, especially in hard forks like the pre-Berlin specifications so far agreed on for YOLO v3, just to ensure that folks who want to deploy a smart contract on Ethereum can deploy it on what do you call it? They can deploy it on Celo, and also, yeah.
We want to maintain compatibility, and we want to add new functionality. So this list is it's not definitive. It's a set of targets that we would like to implement for the first hard fork. We're trying to get as much useful, interesting functionality in all at the same time. We can add new things to this list depending on our work schedule. Things may be removed from the list. This is just an early set of target improvement proposals for Donut.
Right. As well, we have like 3 CIPs that we want to propose. I think we have like James' proposal for the extensible hash function precompiles. We have governable lookback window CIP 21, and we have bytecode CIP 22 to epoch snark data. So because we spent most of the time also talking about what do you call it, with Churrito hard fork, and we gained consensus on that. I don't expect us to go over each item in this specific call for Donut, but like I just wanted to highlight this is the specification that we're proposing, and it's also a time when if anyone wants to propose something to go into the specification, you can propose your idea what you think should go into the hard fork, as long as it's technically sound, and we can make sure that it doesn't impact like the health of the network or the security of the network. Is something that we can start exploring together. If nobody has any like proposals currently, that's okay. We can still review it moving forward. However, we also gonna be having a time when we're gonna agree on a proposal, like all these like the proposals that would go into Donut, and try to move it to last call. That won't happen now. It's probably gonna happen after we activate Churrito, but it's something to keep in mind as well. So yeah, let's see. So one thing that I think we should talk about, I think, is we should definitely have a second call, like another all-core dev call just focused on Donut after Chuito. But other than that, I think for now, just because we spend most of the time talking about Chuito, I would invite everyone to check out the specifications list, and that pull request is part of the agenda, and that would have all the different changes and stuff. Okay. Let me see. Okay. Is there any questions or anything so far about what's going into the specification? I think we covered some of them last time, but we didn't necessarily go into details about any of them. So if there's any comment or specification, we can talk about it now.
I guess I have a pre-compile that I'd like to add to this that I haven't written a CIP for. Is that something that should be discussed on this call, or should we wait until it's pretty simple, but or should we wait until it's been written up?
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
I would go ahead and talk about it now.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm championing this CIP or this precompile on behalf of Kobe, or rather, kind of behalf of the two of us. Sammy and Kobe have been working on a Plumo, and specifically, Sammy has been working on a way to slash for double signing Plumo proofs. So if you're not familiar with Plumo, right, that's the kind of ZK snark based super light way of syncing that will be used kind of in Valora, and I mean anybody who wants to run as light a node as possible. And this is made possible by validators signing kind of a separate blob of data outside of the block hash in order to be validated by this snark. Basically, the proof kind of verifies validators kind of signing off on validator set transitions, which is in the block header, but it's not in a format that is the most friendly to the snark. And so there is a separate blob of data that all validators sign that can be used to create these proofs that light clients can consume. And it is important that the protocol is able to slash validators for signing data that would allow kind of like a fork to happen kind of in the proof, right? So kind of to sign, say, data that allows two proofs to be created, one that says, the validator set at epoch n is X, and one that says the validator set at epoch n is Y. Happy to get into the details of how, so that can be implemented at the smart contract level, but there is a bit of missing functionality that would make that smart contract a lot easier to write, which is exposing the BLS public keys of the validator sets to the EVM. So right now there is a precompile that allows you to fetch the addresses of the validator set or the validator signers for a given epoch or a given block, but there's nothing that exposes the BLS public keys in the same way. And so after talking through all of the options that we were able to come up with for how to build this slashing contract, by far the simplest one, by quite a large margin, was to basically add an analogous precompile that would allow you to fetch the BLS public keys of validators. And we feel that this is like, that I guess, kind of consensus engine introspection in a like general way, which we feel this is like the sort of precompiled that should be added, kind of irrespective of this particular feature that could be able to use it. And so with that, happy to take kind of questions and comments, and somebody will write this up as a CIP.
I have a question. Is that are the BLS public keys part of the validator contract already?
So that does not allow you to get, so yes, but not really. So you can get the BLS public key that a validator has registered right now, but that may not be if they have done a key rotation, that may not be the BLS public key that they used to sign blocks in a previous epoch. And in fact, because key rotations only take place at only go into effect at epoch boundaries, the BLS public key that's stored in the smart contract may not even be the BLS key, the public key of the BLS key that the validator is using to sign blocks right now. And so that's the problem.
This reminds me of the EIP for adding block headers to state, because it's solving a similar problem of getting access to past information. It might be worth looking into how they're doing that and seeing if it would make sense to do a similar pattern here.
Yeah, the way it would work right now, or the easiest thing to do would be to more or less copy exactly the way the precompile works for the validator addresses, right? So every validator has like an address, which is the first or last 20 bytes of the hash of their ECDSA public key, and a BLS public key. And both of those things are stored in a data structure that exists in the consensus engine. And there's basically a mapping of epoch number to a list of address BLS public key pairs. And so when the address the validator address precompile, the way that works is that it just like looks into that data structure and returns kind of whatever value you ask for. And so we would just again, the simplest thing to do would be to just make a similar precompile that just returns the other value in that tuple. But I'll take a look at 2935 because I'm not familiar with that.
No, if we already have an EIP with essentially the same behavior, this makes a lot of sense to me. Precompile, not an EIP.
Yes, we have a precompile that does basically exactly the same thing that we're proposing. We're just proposing one to expose a different field. Or rather, not the other field, right? So not just a different one, but the only other one.
Maybe a procedural question for my understanding is that in CIP 22, currently the epoch snark data CIP, one of the bullet points in the motivation section is to create the necessary infrastructure for on-chain slashing in the case of double signing. Given that the motivation of this CIP you're proposing, Asa, is very similar, would it make sense to bundle those together, or are they split apart for some reason?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's value in this CIP or in this precompile. I think outside of enabling slashing for like Plumo double signing, but certainly that is like the motivation and the first application. Open to I could go either way here. I feel like it would be nice to frame this as a more general CIP because again, it's like while the motivation for adding it is to kind of enable this aspect of Plumo, it really is kind of a like primitive of Celo, right? And of the Celo consensus engine. But I'm happy to go either way. Whatever I guess people would feel makes more sense and is easier to vet works for me.
What I wonder is that I remember us talking about like how we when adding precompose, be careful like the address space. So like maybe we could, there's a way to add this to the existing precompile. Like if you add an extra parameter, for example, you do this and not, and instead of return the address, you return the PLS public key, for example. I don't know, just a consideration to be taken on when we design this.
Yeah, that's a good point. We could roll it into the existing precompile. I guess the problem is that would break, depending, I guess you could add it as an optional parameter, which is not, yeah.
Well, we are doing everything in September, so I guess you could add it as an optional parameter. I'm not completely sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's something that will, this is, this precompile is kind of in its, it should be pretty simple, but I think it's like very much in its nascent stage. Kobe and I actually just had this conversation where we like went through all the options for double signing slashing this morning. And this felt like kind of a clear win. So I think maybe we'll think about this more and exactly like the details of what we want to do, particularly with that respect. And we can write it up and maybe we can discuss the more concrete CIP and these kind of implementation details in the next call. But I just wanted to, I guess, read the room here on like the idea of adding this in the first place.
Cool. So what I would recommend is having a CIP proposal for next time, just for people can review it as well, like with what the specification is. And even if it's in draft stage and, you get feedback to modify it a little bit here and there, that's okay, and we can definitely add that to like the specification and then we can go over all like the entire donut spec in a future call. But thank you for bringing it up. It's an important conversation to have.
Cool. Can do that. Thanks.
There's an ICIP that we also need to write. Again, the simple one. If you want, I can explain that now, or we can write until we have it.
Yeah, it's the 21, right?
No, not that one. That's already there, I see, on the specification. There's the iter-based split. Basically, there was actually, I think it was a validator request, I don't know, like some time ago, of splitting the iter-base into two addresses. One is the TXV recipient and the other is like the validator address. So when you, so blocks are being signed by the validator, and right now the validator is also the header Coinbase and where the gas fees go. That's can be inconvenient because the address that is actually signing, it's actually the signer address. So it's not the validator address, it's the signer key. And so gas fees actually go to the signer key. So we were asked to have the split where the header Coinbase can be an address and the signer of the block can be another one. And so there's again, CIP in process and a change of actually doing just that. It becomes a hard fork because of how we actually validate blocks, and so we need to take that into account whenever proposing new blocks and validating blocks.
So Mariano, as I understand it, there's no CIP proposal for what you're describing, right?
Yeah, we need to write that down, and we're going to again post it and send it to you, and we can discuss that later to have more a concrete
Yeah.
document.
But like, no, I think it's fair to ask about, that other part of the donut. So yeah, if anyone has any comments or questions for Mariano based on his proposal, we can talk about that now.
Seems like a nice feature. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would suggest having a CIP draft for next time, so we can include it within the specification for the donut hard fork, which we're gonna go over in the next call. Yeah, but like I think as an action item for Asa and Mariano, just having a CIP would be very helpful, just for everyone to be able to review them all in one place and stuff. But yeah, cool. Is there anyone who has any question, like so far, just looking at the spec? I know we will still have more time to talk about the donut specification, because for now we're just worrying about Shuito. All these hard fork names are gonna give me diabetes. I swear to God. All right. If there's no further comment on the donut meta CIP, I would suggest we move it to the next call. And for now, I think there's a few proposed, like there's another item on the agenda. Which one is it? I believe it's.
Look at the screen share.
Oh yeah, CIP 10. All right. Oh, actually, yeah, the meta CIP for activated EIP is already in Celo blockchain. Yeah, so I was supposed to work on that this week. It's just, with everything going on, I felt like there was more important stuff to do, at least for that. So we can skip on the meta CIP stuff. Let's go to CIP 10. I believe Nam brought it up.
Yes, as a follow-up from last time, I think people said that the CIP wasn't well specified enough. So I took a stab yesterday in trying to be more specific in the proposed changes. And I think it's in a good state now. So I wasn't entirely sure, if I understood the process correctly, this is now the time when we would maybe try to get rough consensus on it. But the change itself was pretty small. But yeah, basically just wanted to chat about that here.
Yeah, Victor, can you click on the files change tab? Thanks, man. Yeah. Okay, so it's so Nam, this wouldn't require a hard fork, right?
This is a backwards compatible change to the smart contract, the account smart contract, and so there's no hard fork required.
Okay. Yeah, so like hypothetically, how would like somebody want to test it out and stuff, like, just to test the assumption, like if you can, talk about it again.
Yeah, so the goal of the CIP is to make the authorization of signers, which we have currently, more accessible both to smart contracts as well as more generally speaking to other domains, because the current only domains that we have are the Celo core contract domains of voting, validating, and attestation. And so this CIP basically proposes changes to make that more general. The way one would test that is once we have written the changes, they would likely go out with a future Celo core contract release. And as part of that on testnets, you can, I guess, test the functionality of that, if that's what you're asking.
Right, yeah. Yeah, okay. And is there an implementation of it? I see the spec, but is there an implementation for this?
So that's, I guess, maybe a question on my side that I have. Like, what is usually the kind of the order of operations, I guess, because like, I assume we kind of want to make sure that we first agree on this before we do this.
Right. Yeah.
Or should we just like implement it and then see if people agree?
I mean, if the specification is like the assumptions and the technical specs are correct, like the implementation is just like you're just applying the specification, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think what we would be agreeing on for rough consensus is the specification itself. So I would propose for this, because it's not really going through a hard forks part yet, or like it's not really impacting the hard fork timelines or anything like that. I would suggest if asking, folks for a rough consensus, but I would also add is to have like a 2-week review period for this once it goes from draft to last call. Yeah, so I think now would be like time to ask people what they think about the proposal, and we can go from there and see if there's any rough consensus on it.
Cool. Hey, people, what do you think about this?
If you have any questions as well, like, now's the time to ask. If I recall correctly, somebody wanted to review it last time. Was it reviewed? Because the one thing I want to make sure that we all agree that the specification makes sense before we take it to last call. And since this, I think it's a core contract spec update, I'm curious to hear like a second opinion on the specification itself before we can even decide whether to take it to last call after rough consensus.
View it to remember exactly. We're reviewing it. So for whatever that's worth.
Okay. Has anyone else had any kind of further comments or feedback?
None from me, but also like not a dev, so I'm not going to be interacting with this as much.
So what I would propose is for this one, since there's no developers, providing feedback on this, I would suggest we move it to last call for a 2-week period. In the last call, what happened is people should be reviewing it more before we include it in the specification. I'll be reviewing it as well. And after the 2-week period, it moved to accepted. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, it will follow the same kind of deployment schedule as the core contract release, right?
Correct, yep.
Yeah, so after that, we can talk about deployment. Since it's not really something that's happening on the Celo blockchain layer, but rather on the smart contract layer, I think it's like the coordination can be a little different than the hard fork part and stuff.
For sure.
Okay. Cool. So I would suggest we take it 2 Thursdays from now will be the last call review period for this. And then after that, if nobody has any further comment and stuff, we can move it to accepted. And now we can talk about like releasing the update to the core contracts. If people do have comments or reservation, what happens is they have to move back to the draft stage, and then you would have to update it based on the feedback from folks. and then we would have to gain rough consensus again, then move it back to last call. But given that nobody is in like opposed to it currently, I would suggest we take it for 2 weeks to review period and last call. Does that sound good for everyone?
Sounds good.
Cool. Alrighty. So 2 things so far going to last call. Churrito is on Monday, the last day for the last call, and CIP 10, yes, 2 weeks from now. All right. Is there any other item on the agenda? I think, Mariano, you wanted to talk about, what was it? CIP 21, was it?
Yeah, well, last time we did check CIP 21, and I think the ask was to just add the parameters to what were the like loopback window min and max parameters that we are suggesting. So we changed it to the new format and added that. Sadly, we had a mistake and where it says that it goes in burrito. It's not going to burrito. It's go for donut. But yeah, I was similar to Nam, like asking, like, okay, so when we move to next stage, or like, yeah, following the process.
Yeah, so given that it's part of donut specification, like my immediate thought is it should be like rough consensus on it should be measured as part of the donut specification. It just indicates that there's like a consensus impact because one specification overlaps with another one or something. So I would suggest at least for my immediate take would be to we should talk about it in depth within the donut specification call more. That way we can cross up a lot of items on the list, be like, okay, are we moving these to last call or not? And the reason it's different than NAM's proposal, because NAM doesn't require a hard fork and it's like just like a contract sort of upgrade kind of stuff. But if anyone has any other thoughts, please share.
Yeah, again, this is lack of understanding of my part. I was assuming that like there were like 2 things to agree on. One is the what and the other is the when. No, so whether if it's included on donut hard fork, that's more talking on the when. Whether we want this and what we want, it's the what. No, so I was assuming that agreeing on CIP 21, it was more agreeing on the what. And then it was agreeing on the meta CIP, it was agreeing on the when. But again, I'm new to this process too, so I'm not sure what's the recommended approach.
Me specifically, I think that if we're talking about stuff going into a future hard fork, we would include it more in the call about the specific hard fork for that kind of agreement. But if people want to talk about rough consensus, if nobody had any issues with that specific proposal, we can measure rough consensus. I just don't want to put a last call review period for that item outside of the scope of the donut meta specification, in case that there's an overlap in the specification of another item in donut that would either overlap or cause some kind of some sort of issue with this proposal itself. But outside of that, I'm open to anyone else's opinion on this and stuff like that.
Yeah, I know. I guess it's just you and me speaking, so maybe we can not need to keep going over this. My concern was also around like so. Again, the general hard fork process, because for example, Nam was saying, like one thing is to agree on the spec, another is that then you need to implement and test, right? And so when are we going to be ready to implement and test? Is that when all the CIPs of all donuts are already in last call, or actually after last call? That seems to be like, I don't know, kind of late in the process, because it seems that then we need to wait a lot of time for that to happen. And so that's why I was figuring out that we could go over each of them independently.
So I'm linking to stuff from the pre-Berlin Hart specification that is in draft proposal still, because we can still have a testnet for things in draft proposal, because like we don't know the implementation and stuff, which is what I want to highlight as well. These are proposals from Berlin and they're still in draft stage, even though they agreed that this is YOLO v3 specification for a testnet. But this is just like as an example of something that is still in draft because it's still being explored, but it can still be adopted to to be tested with. Here's another one. Yes. These are all going into Berlin so far, and this is what we're adopting, but they're still in draft stage. But yeah, I mean, like if you really feel strongly about pushing for a consensus, I'm happy to take the stage with everyone else. If they have any concerns about your proposals, I just don't see the point of doing that now versus just doing it as part of a donut hard, call specifically for that. But yeah.
Okay, now let's wait. I guess that call is happening in 2 weeks, or when is that call happening? The donut specific one.
Yeah, for what it's worth, most of the stuff are all in draft from Berlin. So it, can be like, and there's a few ones that are not, like they're still in draft, but they're not included in the specification. So I'm hoping like when we have a specification, like the donut specification, as long as it's still in draft, it's not even merged yet. Like I don't want us to be doing rough consensus of what each item inside donut before we even agree what the specification of donut is and this stuff.
As far as when a donut specific call would be, where we go over each of these EIPs and see what's ready to move to last call, I would expect either 2 weeks or 4 weeks from today. I think the churrito is creating a bit of like tension here, where we might end up 2 weeks later on that donut call than we want to be.
I just want to point out what I think seems to be a bit illogical, to be honest. Like, so we are saying that, okay, so you are mentioning EIPs where you actually go implementation, you test all the details whenever you don't really know if that's something that you know or not. So you are actually have teams spending a bunch of time, maybe a lot of time, working on something that we might say, okay, no, we don't want that. No. So I guess there's this alignment that you expect to happen where you say, hey, yeah, that sounds something just that I want to do. Let's try to do it. And yeah, maybe at the end you start exploring, you start implementing, and you say, no, this is not what I want, or this is the results are different. But you were in agreement that that was something that was worth exploring. That was worth, okay, yeah, that's something that we are interested in. And so that's why I don't kind of understand this. Okay, yeah, you can still work, do whatever you want while in draft. But then you can always say, okay, no, I don't want this. And so you are basically asking people to either work beforehand on implementing and doing everything, and then have this final no that it's potentially there, without even first agreeing that it was something that we were as a group interested on. No, and that's kind of like what I think it seems to be kind of illogical from like the most effective way of trying to work around this. And if we say that we are going to wait for 4 weeks to have that conversation, then either we go over and do all the work without knowing that it's something that we want, or wait and then until we have like, okay, we are agreeing that it's something that we want, and then after 4 weeks, then just after 4 weeks, we start implementation. So neither of those options seem to be really great, in my opinion, because on both sides, like, yeah, like, well, as I suppose, I think I see the weakness on both things. So
yeah, well, you know, I think there's a bit of a, I think it's a little bit more friendly than that. Is I think that, you know, right now we can be fairly sure that these CIPs are things that we all collectively want. Generally speaking, I think we as a group can decide and like say if we don't want this, and nobody is objecting to these things when they come up for updates or like overviews, right? So I think it's like relatively clear that these are things that we want, and what we're looking for in the donut specific call and in like moving to last call is that they are ready. We know that this is something we want. Work is being done on it, hopefully in parallel to these calls. What we'd like to see before moving it to last call is evidence that it is ready and can get into the client on time.
well, but you repeat like we are in agreement that this is something that we want. I don't see how or when we actually reach that agreement. No? Okay.
For a lot of these, we've done overviews. We have draft CIPs up on GitHub. We've done back and forth spec review. I would expect that if this was something that we didn't want or that was actively harmful to Celo, it would be caught during the CIP drafting and specification process and in overview blocks onto the all core devs calls.
So does everybody in the room agree on that? Like I don't know how many have actually read those CIPs.
I maybe want to agree with Mariano here, but I think it's mostly a miscommunication problem as far as I can tell. Basically, the question is if something is in draft stage, right? Like, do we consider this to be general agreement that this is a good thing to do? Because it sounds like what James is saying is that, yeah, if there's a draft and it has been mentioned either on the call or on other forums, and like there's been no opposition to it, one can assume that there is agreement on this. Versus, I think Mariano, and I think probably myself as well, believe that the rough consensus process is the way to determine that agreement. And so I think it would probably be worthwhile for us to, I think, specify whether the rough consensus is about when to deliver it and say it in a hard fork, or whether the change in of itself is the right change to do, irrespective of implementation.
Just like functionally speaking, we can't all review every CIP, right? We can't all review every change to the specification in every CIP while it's in draft stage. I try to read every CIP or at least skim them, but we can't expect that of everybody who's going to be participating in the all core devs call and participating in rough consensus. what I'd like is, for the CIP draft and specification process to surface issues that we discuss on the all core devs call. And if nobody is raising issues and people are reviewing the CIPs, we have rough consensus that they're good. Yes, this is a bit of a poorly defined process, and that's somewhat intentional. I don't think that we need this like commit in advance of seeing a specification and an implementation that we want to build this, and then we need another commit later to include it. I would like to see the first part of that process being much, like less formalized, so that there can be a lot more people writing and specifying CIPs.
Yeah, I think that sounds great to me. I agree that it does feel heavy to do that, but then I think being, I guess, explicit that, or like, I think your perspective that drafts that are written and have had quote appropriate time to have provided feedback on should be considered accepted in that regard. I think would be, yeah, I think sounds like a great assumption, and we should use that moving forward.
If nobody is telling you that they think this is a bad idea, or that they explicitly do not want that or would oppose that change, then that should be a signal that things are progressing and moving forward, and that your change is desirable to people. They're up. Yeah, go ahead.
I like the idea of being it more flexible and less formal. But when you say that that's a signal that nobody's, I think it's a kind of a signal of two things. Either no one is really aware or read it, and have never, like, you don't have an like reviewers, or you actually have reviewers and they are saying, oh, that's nice. So depends on, like, I would say, the level of engagement, and that's why, like, I initially saw, like, again, having these meetings and bringing the subject here would kind of generate more of that engagement, and that's why I was kind of surprised. But I don't know if we think that, for example, the governance loopback window has been there for more than 2 weeks, then I can assume that we are in agreement and I can implement that. That's perfect. But I'm not sure. Again, I would challenge to see how many have actually read the CIP.
Yeah, I want to just quickly agree with Mariana here that I think one of the fears that it sounds like Mario and I have is what we've been in a past situation where we've written up, like, maybe not like a very formal CIP, but maybe design docs, and like sent them out to everybody and have received no feedback. And then later on, when we did the implementation, a lot of things have been surfaced. And so avoiding those situations, I think, would be desirable. I think maybe the CIP process and the ACD call and everything is kind of sufficient enough to catch those situations where people will provide that feedback earlier on in the process during the specification instead of the implementation. And I'm happy to, I think, yeah, like with this process, see that that will be the case or not. But just wanted to, I think, and if I hear Mariana correctly, I think we just wanted to raise that possible tension that might come down the road.
I think one of the advantages that you've been experiencing as a small network is you didn't have the community was still small, and there's not a lot of disagreement because, people are, happy to be participating in that. The process, though, handled a lot of good things in the sense that once you have a really big community, that, like, if you want to get to the level of Ethereum or, try to advocate for that kind of thing, it pays off to have a good process. And even if it's slow, it would allow for more people to submit proposals and stuff, and allow, having clear, like, secure ways in which you can have a last call review period after there's like an implementation and stuff like that. And that's what the process is trying to cover. If you want to like a process that is more like a Silicon Valley, move fast kind of thing, that's not what the CIP process is. And I'm happy to hear like, alternative for that. I do want to bring up that we have 3 minutes until the call ends, and I want to respect everyone's time as well. And if it's a conversation that you want to have at a, if people want to propose like a different CIP process or like have other ideas how to optimize it, we can talk about that. But I would suggest we do that asynchronously.
Sure, let's do that asynchronously. But like by any means, like we are not trying to make this like a Silicon Valley ship it mentality. It's more about like having a process that we don't do waste efforts.
Yeah, it's about not committing engineering resources without confidence.
Exactly.
Great. So thank you, everyone. I think the biggest takeaway here is that Churrito is going to be like, we're going to make a pull request to move it to last call. It will be ready. Stay tuned. We think like the proposal is 2 weeks for baklava activation, 3 weeks for Alpha Horus, and 4 weeks for mainnet. So that should be like the most immediate kind of takeaway from this call. And like, I'll keep you posted. I'll start coordinating with all the validators and all the node operators and exchanges within this month. All right. So thank you so much, Victor. Thank you. You've been a champ, as a co-host. Much appreciated.